you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Gracias por estar con nosotros.
Parent Student Secondary Reopening Forum. We hope this evening will provide some answers to your questions and give you our best thinking at this time. For those of you who tuned in to our board meeting on Tuesday evening, we've already had some new information that's giving us additional hope that we may be able to do more in the very near future, but still beginning with the plan that we did share on Tuesday evening. It's important to remember before we begin this evening, we're all very excited and hopeful of returning secondary students in the month of March. As a former high school principal at Turlock High School for 11 years, I know firsthand the experiences of our secondary students, particularly our seniors, freshmen stepping on campuses for the very first time. There's nothing that any one of us on this screen want more than to see young bodies on our campuses again, to bring back that feeling of living. So please know that we're doing everything we possibly can. I think Marie will share some additional information this evening in our communications with public health following our board meeting and today, as we continue to seek clarification and the opportunity to do more with the restrictions that have been placed upon us. It's also important to know that we're operating under the guidance of California Department of Public Health, most specifically Stanislaus County Public Health. They're the ones that are making the decisions of what we need to do to reopen safely. Our challenge is thinking outside the box of how we can do that with the large number of secondary students who we do have. A lot of information came out this last weekend over President's Holiday. I'm sure many of you were glued to the TV just listening to information shared by CDC, because they do allow for more flexibility. Unfortunately, CDC's guidelines or considerations do not supersede that of county and state public health. And it's not uncommon, it's somewhere in the future, very near future, that public health may choose to adopt and align themselves closer to those considerations with the CDC. At this point in time, they have not, but we're hopeful because in the past they have, and we believe that may happen again as well. So thank you for joining us. Our chat room, the Q&A is open for you to be asking questions, but I'd like to just let you know, we will not be responding to individual questions on the chat. Rather, Marjorie Betancourt will be looking for similar type questions. So at the end, she will ask us those questions, kind of categorize them, being mindful of time. We'll do our best to respond. If we don't have the information this evening to respond to you, Marie will be putting together an FAQ following this evening's forum, and then we will share that out so that you have answers to all the questions that we were fielding this evening. They may not be your exact question, but I promise you it will hit extremely close to the question. And if you have anything that comes up after this forum this evening, I encourage you to reach out to your site principal, who will have the best information for their school site that can best guide you. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to hand it over to my Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Heidi Lawler.
Good evening and welcome. We're so pleased to have you here so we can share information regarding the reopening for our secondary students. I know that for many, there is an awareness of the schedules that we're going to share tonight, and that students will come back, as our elementary students have come back, 2 days per week in person. And that for some families, that's a relief and they're pleased with that. And for others, they're very disappointed because they believe we should come back with 5 days per week. I will share that I met today with our team of care program clinicians, and these women are working with students on a variety of different social, emotional, and mental health issues, which we know there are many, and are trying to provide support. But one of the things that they shared today, without even being prompted, was that the number of students who are reporting that their clients are making significant progress since they've been able to come back to in-person learning. And even if it's only 2 days per week, just being there with their teachers and with their peers is making a significant difference. One of the clinicians shared that she has been surprised both as a clinician as well as a parent about the amount of value in those 2 days. And she herself even questioned, like, wow, 2 days, is that going to make a difference? She said it's just been a world of difference with her son. So I think that, as Dana said, we're optimistic about moving forward and know this is the beginning to getting students back to school in the traditional manner. Next slide. Tonight, we will be sharing the requirements for reopening schools, talking about our COVID safety plan and some specific changes because those continue to be introduced to us, talk about the schedules. We'll also share some information on what learning will look like for your student with the concurrent learning platform, and then talk about what we'll need from parents as far as making commitments so that we can continue through the spring. As far as goals, we are already moving forward with completing all necessary actions so that we are ready when given the green light to move forward with reopening our schools, our goal is to have effective instruction and high levels of engagement for your children, for your students. We believe that in-person learning will provide them that opportunity to engage with their teachers and their fellow students in a meaningful way. We also, as I said, are very mindful of the social emotional well-being of students and the importance of providing some support in that area, as well as focusing on that on a daily basis while they're in person. As Dana shared, one of our biggest areas of focus is our seniors. We know that this has been a year like no other for any senior class. And so the graduation and the remainder of the senior year is very important to us, and that is an area of focus. We also want parents to know that we're looking ahead to the 21-22 school year, and that when those students who are continuing with us, that school year is going to look very different at the beginning, and that we are going to be working with our teachers to determine where students are and working through adjusting curriculum to meet their needs, as school districts are across the state, across the country, and around the world, as many students have lost the same amount of instructional time in person as our Turlock Unified students have. And then finally, we are really excited that we're able to deploy technology to improve the opportunities and increase time for students learning with their teacher. And so we've purchased a system called Logitech Meetup, where teachers will be working with students who are present in the classroom and students who are distance learning simultaneously in a synchronous manner to provide a continuity of instruction. This will be a challenge for probably both teachers and students at first, but we anticipate that this will be really a way to help us gain the most instructional time during the spring semester as we move forward. Next slide. This is just a reminder of the California tier framework that most of you are probably very familiar with. Currently, we are at Stanislaus County in the purple tier at the widespread, and we are hoping to move toward the red tier, because that then next will move us toward reopening. We currently most recently had the information on we are at our tier assignment currently is, as I said, in that purple tier and widespread, but we are seeing cases decline, which will lead to our being able to reopen with students in person. And so as we look to the CDC, CDPH crosswalk, Maria, I think I'll have you go ahead and step in there.
Sure. So Dana kind of alluded to this in the beginning. And this is a slide we added since our board meeting, is that I know there's a lot of confusion between what the CDC came out and said and how California was going to react to that. And this is a crosswalk that got put out by the governor's office that basically says, thank you for sharing this new guidance. It's a consideration, not a mandate. But, oh, by the way, you're in California and those are the rules you have to follow. So there's actually a lot of alignment. That's why it's crosswalk. They're showing what things are aligned. But the key takeaway here is the CDC guidance is highly aligned with California's approach. Where there are differences, however, California's health and safety standards for school staff and students are generally more cautious. And where there's a conflict, the CDPH has to take precedence.
For the secondary approval process, And we are working through this currently, required to submit our COVID safety plan, which has been submitted to them already. And it also has been posted, the draft has been posted on our website. So again, we are poised to do everything that is required of us in order to reopen. And again, as Dana shared and Maria said, we are required to follow the guidance of the local public health. And so we are doing so in order to open safely and move forward with in-person instruction. This is just a quick list of the COVID-19 school guidance checklist, and Marie will be speaking to most of these areas. Everything from creating those stable group structures, which allow for social distancing and contact tracing, to face coverings and other protective gear, healthy hygiene practices, and our communication plans. So with regard to stable group structures, this is how the students and staff are kept in those stable groups where if somebody becomes infected, we're able to track that virus.
Oops, I added this slide, Heidi, so I was going to just provide further context for what you're about to discuss for the schedules. So this is actually from Medeiros Elementary and is an example of what a stable group looks like for elementary, right? So stable groups provide a key mitigation layer in schools. A stable group is a group with fixed membership that stays together without mixing with any other groups for any activities. And so when you read that sentence and you think about what high school is like, right, with students attending 6 periods in a school day, that's why reopening secondary schools present some challenges. I'm kind of looking at the chat questions. I know there's some questions about, why can't TUSD open 5 days a week? And we're going to get to the schedules and explaining that. But one thing you have to remember too is it's very important about size, right? So a smaller district, a smaller school district, for example, Chatham right now, is going 5 days a week. And how that works is they have in their middle school 12 students in one class, 9 students in the other class, and then the teachers switch during the day. So to scale something like that up in TUSD, where many times teachers, especially in junior high or high school, have single subject credentials, and so you can't really stay at the same teacher for half the day, present some unique challenges. So we're going to share our schedules later and kind of the thinking and purpose of what went into that. But stable groups, the reason why you create stable groups is it decreases the opportunity for exposure to or transmission of the virus, reduces the number of exposed individuals if COVID-19 is introduced into the group, facilitates more efficient contact tracing in the event of a positive case, and allows for targeted testing and quarantine of a single cohort instead of potential school-wide closures in the event of a positive case or cluster of cases. So we'll be talking about more of these things later when we get into when do we have to close a classroom, when do we have to close a school, and what is contact tracing.
So as we look at the blended learning model with synchronous instruction, we designed this for our secondary students so that we can have a limited number of students on campus in classrooms, and then the other for part of the week, and then the other students, and then at home for the remainder of the other day, and vice versa. And so, for example, that group A, on Monday they're on campus, Tuesday they're distance learning. All students are distance learning on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, that Monday group comes back on campus, and Friday they're distance learning. We did initially look at full day schedules and worked toward putting that together. However, when we met and shared that with public health, there was too great of a concern that there were just too many exposures during the course of the day, and that it was not at that time going to work in secondary. We will do everything we can as we move through the spring to increase opportunities for student learning and increase the amount of time they're able to spend on campus. We also currently have some students who are participating in TUSD's hybrid model. That's an independent learning model, and they may continue to do so with an interaction check-in daily, and then weekly support and independent assignments. And so with that,
I don't mind doing this one, Heidi,
okay,
for the contact tracing. So Heidi kind of went over our schedule, and I know a common question I've got is why doesn't it match elementary? So unfortunately, when we initially thought of reopening elementary, we actually had this schedule, and there was some concern about, cleaning between cohorts. And we'll share a little bit what we know now in the pandemic versus then. But we had originally had this schedule for elementary, and then we switched it to Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Unfortunately, we didn't want to cause further disruption to elementary by making them align to this plan, but our secondary students cannot follow a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule. I'll talk about why that is. We need to build in some time for us to do contact tracing. So if someone was positive in a classroom and we have to contact and do contact tracing of who are the close contacts, notify public health, notify parents, we need to have some time between when the student was on campus and when the students are returning. Also, if you know anything about COVID and in contact tracing, we usually are looking at a 48-hour infectious period. So it's 48 hours prior to symptoms or 48 hours prior to a test. So this model also potentially only will have someone on campus one day during their infectious period instead of two if we had done Monday, Tuesday. So that was some of the thinking about why we had to follow this Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday split. This is also just to let you know a little bit about contact tracing. So when we have a positive case in the classroom, we do have to work with public health to report that. We have to say who the positive person was, give their background and information, and we enter this in an online system called StandTrack. And then we also have to go through and list all the students' names who were close contacts. So for elementary, typically that usually involves only a line list for group A, right, who attend Monday, Tuesday, or a line list for group B that attend Thursday, Friday. Even in the current models of schedules, which we're going to go over, we will potentially have to have three classrooms worth of students on a line list. So I'm just trying to give you a little bit of background about what the thinking was in creating the schedules that we have now.
And so in looking at these schedules, we have the schedules available for each of the secondary schools. I'm going to take some time to speak to the Dutcher Middle School schedule, which most of them are very similar. These were developed with teacher input and are designed to provide that synchronous learning as I shared. So if we think about this from the perspective of your student, and if your student is in the purple group at Dutcher and will be attending school in person on Monday and Thursday, this is what their week will look like. So your student will come to school on Monday morning at 8:15, and we'll start with period 2, and then have those 50-minute classes, second period, third period, fourth period, and fifth period. And then at the end of fifth period, they will be released for the day to go home. For those who are getting lunch, they will have grab and go lunches, take the bus home or transportation from family. And then in the afternoon, your student who is in the purple group will be logging on for zero period if they're a zero period student, and then periods 6, 7, and 8 for a reduced period, but to get instruction in all classes throughout the day. On Tuesday, your student who is in the purple group will be logging on from home for periods 2, 3, 4, and 5, while the teacher is providing that synchronous instruction. Again, there will be that break in the middle of the day for lunchtime and for teachers to have time for planning, student outreach, parent communication. And then your student will log on again in the afternoon, zero period if they have zero period, and then periods 6, 7, and 8. On Wednesday, your student will have distance learning currently for the entire day, just as we currently have distance learning scheduled on Wednesdays. And then on Thursday, your student will attend school in periods 6, 7, and 8. If they have a zero period, they will stay until 11:50. If they do not have zero period, their day will end at 10:55. And then again, grab and go lunch and busing, and then we'll have teacher planning time. And then your student will log on for periods 2, 3, 4, and 5 for those reduced periods, so they're able to have that continuity of instruction. This meets the instructional minutes for the state at this time with distance learning, and again, keeps our students engaged throughout the week. Marie, if you want to go to the next schedule. And to look at Turlock Junior High School, which again, junior high program, grades 7 and 8. And this schedule is very similar. Adjustments have been made specific to campuses, which are minimal as far as adjustments in the start times and end times, but are consistent in the means of providing the instruction and allowing students to have instruction with their teacher every day, either in person on the days they're attending or from home on the days when they are distance learning. And next, to look at the high school schedules. Pittman High School, the difference that we would see with Pittman and with Turlock High School is that their regular periods are somewhat longer due to the structure of their day, with 1 hour periods during the morning. But again, as with the junior high students, they'll go home for lunch and then they'll log back on in the afternoon. And for Turlock High School, you can see it's very similar. With our two program equity sites, Academy Charter and Roselawn, the schedules are really designed specifically to meet their needs there. And so that the counselor and administration and teachers will be working closely with families to ensure that everybody has an understanding of that time when students are in person and when they are learning from home. And with Roselawn, due to the nature of their schedule, again, the periods are somewhat shorter, but they have the same model where they are having instruction during the morning and then going home in the afternoon and having distance learning in the afternoon.
Marie, while you're flipping those slides, Heidi, if I could just interject something, I'm looking on the Q&A and it seems to be a prevalent question. So I just want to let folks know as they're watching this, so we will not be forcing any students to return to in-person learning in the schedule that we're providing. If distance learning is working for your student, your family, and your circumstances, you will be absolutely allowed to remain on that. The only thing that I will share is that this Friday, which is tomorrow, the survey will be sent out to students. We strategically put it tomorrow after this presentation so students and families could learn and understand more before making that commitment. And the commitment is very important because based on the number of commitments of students who do wish to return to, at this point in time, right now, 2 half days a week, until we are able to increase that time in person to full days, looking at what we can provide in the very near future on Wednesdays. The commitment is very important. But what I have to tell you is this: if you're waiting for the days to increase and the hours to increase, it's best to commit. It's best to commit to the model that we're showing you rather than remain on distance learning, because we have to base our decision on how many days or hours we'll be able to increase to based on the number of students who are committed to returning in person. And I think I use this as an example at the board meeting, and I know this isn't going to be the case, but I use it as an example. If only let's just say that only 30% of our secondary students had intentions of returning in person, we know that we have the capacity to possibly do more. But if that was reversed to 70% committing to in-person learning, that creates some different parameters for us to work within. So it's important that those commitments are made with the best of intentions of holding yourself to that for the remainder of the school year. So I'm noticing on the chat, if 2 days is a waste of my time, can I change when we get to 5 days? You may be able to join in-person learning when it reaches 5 days, but we can't make that commitment because we won't know what the state and county guidelines are for maintaining social distancing and safety. So please think about that carefully. I'm also noticing several parents asking, will it be possible to have my secondary children on the same schedule if I have someone in middle school and someone in high school, or multiple children at one school? Maybe you've got a freshman, a junior, and a senior. Our principals are committed to working with families to make sure that your children, your students, can attend the same days, so that you are, arranging transportation, and it not becoming, another obstacle for you to have, making sure your kids are in, at school in person. So we will work with you on that. And I have the confidence that our principals will be able to make that happen. Thanks, Heidi.
I just want to interject one more thing on the schedule, Heidi, because I'm seeing this question too. If you're currently in distance learning, the schedule will not be the same schedule. You'll still have the same classes, the same teachers, but you will be following the schedule too, but you will be remaining at home, tuning in synchronously to your class and interacting through Zoom with your classmates in person. So the teacher is going to be having both groups, the in-person and the distance learning. It's called synchronous instruction. So if you're remaining in distance learning, this is your schedule too. You're just not having the in-person part. Again, what we're trying to do eventually, and we're going to keep, every day things change. The legislature came out with a new law today that we're going to see if Governor Newsom's going to pass. That's going to change a lot of new parameters for what we're doing. So hopefully we will be able to get kids to be more in person, like a full day, and also, alternating Wednesdays, and eventually, additional days. But like Dana said, we have to know that, and that's why we have the commitment survey. We may not be able to mass change people later on when those things open up for us.
And before I hand this over to Marie to talk about more of those safety protocols, this approach, it does allow us to reopen safely and allows us to begin to get those students back on campus, and we're making every effort to minimize disruption. And by that, I mean that we're making every effort to maintain the same schedules for students. And we have a commitment to that, as well as with working with you for siblings. And so it's important to us. We're trying, throughout this pandemic, we've tried very hard to work with families, and we'll continue to do so as we're getting students back on campus.
I also just want to say, because I saw some transportation questions, is that we will be having home to school transportation. So we consulted with our director of transportation, and the reason why we have it about 90-minute block, depending on the campus, is so that students who are walkers, 7-12, can have the time to walk home, and students who are riding the bus will have time to be transported. So that's why there's such a large block in the middle of the day, is to make sure students can get home. Okay, I think this is me. All right, so that again covered schedules, covered stable cohorts. I'm seeing a lot of questions about safety, and so that's kind of what I'm going to go over. And then our biggest concern is getting to your questions, and yes, they will be answered. I saw someone ask. Yes, we're looking at them, and we have someone kind of keeping track and kind of organizing them for us for the end. Okay, so entrance, egress, and movement within the school. So all the things I'm going to be talking about are what are required for us to have in our COVID safety plan that we submit to the state. Okay, so all of our school principals will be working to implement procedures to support 6 feet of physical distancing, no less than 4 feet, but preferably 6 for students and staff as they enter, exit, and move throughout the school day. To the greatest extent possible, students will be spaced apart on buses as well. Currently, for home to school transportation, there will be a cap. You can see what the seats look like. They will not be 2 students to a seat unless they're siblings. So even our home to school transportation, we have to be thinking about safety. All of our buses also have hand sanitizer installed, and students will be required to wear a face mask, which leads us into face coverings. So all students and staff on campus will be required to wear a face covering at all times, except eating or drinking. So in the classroom, outside the classroom, during PE, they're all required to wear face coverings. And if you look at anything about the new CDC guidance, we know that 2 of the most important parts of the health and safety mitigation for COVID is physical distancing and face coverings. Those are kind of the eggs we put our basket in the most. Students and staff will be administered personal face coverings. So we do have those to distribute to students. I suspect most want their own, but we do have parameters on what can be worn. The only things that are approved are cloth face coverings or disposable surgical masks. Cannot wear masks with valves, bandanas, gaiters, or that's it, none of those. So you're not required to double mask. I sometimes get questions about that. There's a lot of new research that is recommended, but it's not required. You just need to be having a face covering or a surgical mask on. Health screenings, this is something that if you have elementary students has gone a little bit of a change. So if you remember or realize that we used to do temperature screenings for students as they came to school, we no longer do that based on CDC and CDPH guidance. It's not recommended, not because taking temperatures is bad, but there's a risk of students congregating. And if you're thinking about a high school or a junior high and, you know, hundreds of kids coming to campus, it creates a risk that kind of outweighs the benefits of taking someone's temperature. All of our staff must self-screen every day for any kinds of symptoms of COVID or exposures. And then we do ask you, as well as a family, do a daily check for your students. You know, if anyone's ill, if anyone's been exposed, obviously if anyone's positive, that would absolutely trigger a need to contact the school. Healthy hygiene practices is another area that I feel has kind of had a lot more attention now. You know, we've always heard about washing your hands, but there used to be a lot more focus on disinfection. And now the greater emphasis is on hand washing. So making sure that your students are, you know, before they go into the classroom, most likely they'll be sanitizing their hands. As they leave, they'll sanitize their hands, encouraging them, obviously, when they use a restroom to wash at least for 20 seconds and rub for 20 seconds with soap and water. And then let's see, and then we'll have a lot of signage. I'm just realizing I'm looking at this. This is my elementary signage. I need to make it more high school friendly for sure. But we have lots of signage around campus promoting all these safety measures as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about contact tracing. Okay, so the actions that we will take if there's a confirmed case. I saw someone had asked about that. Okay, so at TUSD, in TUSD, our site principals, myself, the communication coordinator, and David Ladde and Fernando Ureno in Human Resources, we all work as a team to do contact tracing and when there's a positive case. So the principals and myself handle anything that happens in the school. Dave and Fernando and HR handle our staff. So what does that mean? I showed you the line list. That's something that we fill out so that we can submit it to public health so they can contact parents to make sure if they have any questions, they get answered, find out if there may be additional contacts for positive cases, because our line lists are just what happens in the school. It doesn't necessarily encompass a positive person that had contacts outside the school. And then, like we've shared, we will be adhering to our county public health and CDPH guidance for classroom, school, or district closure determinations. We'll talk more about that in a second. Also, some new guidance is that in the event of an outbreak, which an outbreak is defined as 3 or more epidemiologically linked cases, you will receive a separate type of notification from us. That's new. So when to close a classroom, when to close a school, and when to close the district. This also has undergone a little bit of a change. And if you watched our board meeting on Tuesday night, there was a lot of discussion about the when to close a classroom part. So you have to understand that different counties have different public health officers and they have different rules. So what's happening in Merced County or San Joaquin County may not be reflected about what's happening in Stanislaus County. So currently, and we did receive confirmation, as Dana was alluding, I was going to share too, we did receive confirmation that if we have a positive case in the classroom, including in secondary, we will need to send all those students home to quarantine for 10 days. Why? Why are we doing that and not doing something called seating chart contact tracing? So in some school situations, it may be difficult to determine whether individuals have met this criterion for being a close contact, and an entire classroom or other group may need to be considered exposed, particularly if people have spent time together indoors. So our public health, who we heard from today, has a lot of concern about ventilation, about students that maybe are not masking appropriately, maybe not social distancing appropriately, and because we're going into a time when we might be having increased variants of COVID in California and across the US, They're just trying to exercise caution. So remember, we looked at those schedules. I'm seeing a lot of concerns about them. One of the main reasons why we have only 3 classes right now in a day is that there was a positive student in first period, second period, and third period, and your student went to school with that positive student that day, and it was determined that student was sick that day. Your child is now a close contact, and we need to quarantine all the students. That means in a given school day, we'd have to send home 3 classrooms to quarantine. If that happened in multiple classrooms, we'd have to send multiple classrooms home to quarantine. So you can imagine if we have students attending 6 periods in a day, and that one positive student went to 6 periods, again, we'd be sending home 6 periods in a day. Now, I guess the rainbow in this situation, the hope that we have is that we can prove when we bring back students and we can show Stanislaus County Public Health, hey, here's what our data shows. This is what we're seeing. We think it's going to be safe. We want to bring back additional students full day. We may not even have to do that because, like we talked about, CDC came out with some new guidance, and they're also possibly going to be sending some more rules or regulations, suggestions, considerations about contact tracing. So I do think that hopefully we're going to get to a point where we can hopefully move away from closing a whole classroom and look more at seating chart contact tracing. What does that mean? That means if the positive student sat in row 2, seat 3, we might only have to send home the students that sat around him or her to quarantine. Okay, so I know it's frustrating. I know the schedule is not ideal, but that is truly the rationale behind why it looks like it does.
And Maria, I'd like to add, because I was noticing on some of the questions, some folks are asking, so why are other schools or districts able to do more with what Marie just spoke about? Merced County, San Joaquin County, I know we're right in the middle of those two, but their guidelines from their public health officials in their county are allowing for that, that type of contact tracing using the class, schedules or seating charts. And so we're not there yet. Our public health is not allowing that, and that will allow us to do more. That's what we've been communicating with public health all day yesterday and today, just to get confirmation on that. We were hoping that they might bend and work with us more, realizing that the positive caseload is going down, but they're being extremely cautious. They're mindful of what we're asking and what we would like to see happen so that we can increase the amount of in-person time on campus. But as of this evening at 6:13, we don't have that green light.
And I just want to share because I'm seeing it right now and it's kind of on topic, is so someone asked, like, what happens if a student attended Monday and then says they showed symptoms while at school on Monday and they don't get the test result until Thursday or Friday? That often happens. So unfortunately, if your student was on campus during their infectious period, we would still have to go close that cohort. Also getting questions about, have we had positive cases in elementary school? What I can share with you, and next week when you guys come to our safety training, I'll go into this in more depth, is that in general, the transmission we see in schools is mostly with adults who've acquired COVID elsewhere. We do not see a lot of student-to-student transmission, but remember, K5, TK6 is very different than secondary, right? So what the trends that we've noticed for elementary, just from our own experience, could be different for high school. But yes, we have had positive cases. We have closed classrooms. We often get asked, why didn't you reopen in red when you had your chance? You missed your opportunity. And if you remember, back in November, we were heading into a surge, which I think we all remember because we had to go back into a lockdown, what that felt like. And at that time in TUSD, I would say every week we were closing a classroom almost every day. So we knew that if we returned our secondary students, again, with a schedule similar to what we showed, it wouldn't take very long that we would have to close our school again. And if you know anything about what's happening around us, Merced was in a similar situation. They did reopen, but they wound up closing before Christmas because of that those occurrences. Ripon had a similar situation. So again, when your community case rate is very high, it doesn't mean there's more in-school transmission. It just means those cases make their way into school because people acquire it elsewhere, then they come to work, and then we have to quarantine, people who are exposed. Okay, so let me go on to the next one. Okay, so physical distancing. So how we will be arranging our routines for physical distancing. This is another big factor in why some small, like Hilmar, for example, smaller schools are able to do things that TUSD may not be able to right now. So the new guidance is we have to have at a minimum 4 feet of space between student desks, right? We can't, some of our classes, I'm thinking of psychology at Trolloc High School, where we had 38 in there every year. Even cutting it in half, and some kids staying on distance learning, it would still be incredibly difficult to do that. So we have to bring everyone back. So that's why we're having to cohort and split students into different cohorts. So there will be some use of plexiglass barriers or partitions or things of that nature. However, if we can have 6 feet apart with our desks, then we wouldn't be using the plexiglass barriers. And even if we had 4 feet, we still may not be using the plexiglass barriers. There's a lot of new research, because this is what happens in COVID, that everyone does a study about something that honestly, sometimes those may be doing more harm than good. If you think about COVID and a lot of aerosol transmission, what they're finding is that these barriers can kind of impede airflow, and particles can kind of build up against the plexiglass and do more harm than good. So what types of things might we do if we were 4 feet apart on desks? More ventilation in the classroom, right? That's a huge one. Keeping the door open. We'll talk about ventilation in a second, but having increased or improved filters that have higher ratings. Those are the types of things you can do and show to the state, because we would have to show it to the state if we were going to do less than 6. Explain the mitigation things that we're going to do to get to 4 feet. And then again, we have lots of different signage and things of that nature on campus. So staff training and family education. So we'll be talking about this in a little bit, but we are going to be doing all of our training for our secondary staff next week. We're moving everything up a week. In the letter that Dana sent home, parents weren't going to be trained until that first week in March. And we said, when we heard all this stuff that was going on with CDC, it's like, that's too long. We need to get these people trained sooner. So next week, you're going to be invited by your site principals to a COVID safety training. And even if you're not committed to coming back to in-person, we'd like you to attend to hear that presentation, because it's much more focused on all the ins and outs of how school will look with all these safety procedures to help you make an informed decision on your commitment surveys. So again, these are the types of things that we're required to do. We could just send home a packet of materials, but we think it's important to have a conversation. And I would apologize.
Lavándose las manos, manteniéndose de 4 a 6 pies separados.
There's a people, we have a cap on how many people we can actually interact with. But when we do our safety trainings, we're hopeful to have more interaction depending on how many people are in those trainings. Okay, so testing, I'm seeing a lot of questions about testing. And again, just like how COVID is, yesterday or Tuesday at the board meeting, we're sharing one thing, and now the legislature's just passed some new a new bill, and I'm hearing there's some information about testing, so we still need to figure out what's going to be required. The thing I can share with you right now is at this point, there is no mandate for asymptomatic testing for staff or students. We're exploring different options where we might have some voluntary, easier voluntary ways to do asymptomatic testing. But right now, we just encourage our students and our staff to use our free county testing sites to do asymptomatic testing on their own. And because we're in the purple tier, they recommend at least weekly, but if you can't do weekly, every 2 weeks. So we have many of our staff that voluntarily do that on their own. So when do we recommend testing? We absolutely recommend testing for symptomatic people, and we recommend for screening. So if you've been exposed to COVID 5 to 7 days after that exposure, and this is all spelled out in the letters we send home, we recommend that you go get tested. Okay, identification and reporting of cases. Like I was sharing with you, that we are required to report to public health any kind of positive cases in our schools. We entered in stand track within 24 hours. And reporting doesn't take a holiday. So often on the weekends, we're still doing this as well. Every Friday, you can go to the TUSD website and we will have our COVID dashboard updated for the week. And you will see all
Cada
the
viernes nosotros vamos a estar
at every school for students and staff. Okay, communication. So you may be wondering, well, if there's a positive case in the classroom, how will I know about it? We have a very tight communication protocol in TUSD for this type of situation. You can certainly expect to receive 1 or 2 type of letters. You'll get a scenario 3 letter, which is if there was a positive case in your classroom and your child was exposed, we will notify you about that. We will not share any confidential information, but we will say that a student or staff member in your student's classroom has tested positive for COVID-19 and you were determined to be a close contact. So we recommend you go home and quarantine for 10 days, test 5 to 7 days after last exposure. And it's, all kinds of instructions. And we also have some pamphlets and brochures and things like that to help you understand that. Another thing we do, which is kind of above and beyond, it's not required, it's suggested in the state guidance, is that if there was someone in the classroom whose mom maybe tested positive and that child had to go home or that student had to go home to quarantine, we will also send a notification about that your student, a student or staff member in your student's classroom had someone who was tested positive for COVID and they've gone home to quarantine. We recommend that you monitor your child's symptoms. So that just kind of gives you a heads up to be on the lookout for any potential exposures. Because sometimes what happens is if someone's mom tested positive and a student was on campus, but they weren't positive, it might be 4 or 5 days, 6 days before they develop symptoms. And as long as your student was not a close contact, meaning within 48 hours, next to that student, then you would not receive a scenario 3 letter. You would only just have gotten the scenario 2 letter. So again, that's our process. And I know it's confusing. We'll go over it way more detail next week, but we do communicate through our Blackboard communication system and through, the mail, and we send letters home about those things. And then trying to get to the home stretch here, cleaning and disinfection. This pandemic, continues to evolve our thinking of COVID. We know in the beginning of the pandemic, they thought, do you need to wash the Amazon package and wash your groceries and, spray the takeout box? You don't have to really do any of that because we know now that COVID is not really spread through surface contamination. It's very rare. It's mainly spread through respiratory droplets. So although there will be cleaning between periods, and Barney can probably address that later because I saw some of the questions in the chat, there will not be someone coming in with a bottle of disinfectant spray necessarily. The state only recommends disinfectant if there's a confirmed positive case in the classroom. Then absolutely we go in and do a deep clean. Okay, so I'll have Barney talk. I don't know, would you like to talk about that now, Barney, or just address it in the Q&A?
I would go ahead and finish your presentation, then we can address it.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm going to turn this back over to Heidi, and I'm going to keep a eye on the chat, and we're getting close to answering questions.
Just to wrap up, so the next steps are important for these are some steps that we need parents to help us out with. So first of all, following this evening, we wanted to provide this information to you. Starting tomorrow, we will have that secondary school communication and commitment survey. So we'll be providing some information to you digitally and in hard copy. And then that will give you the opportunity to make that decision for your student. And as Dana said at the beginning, and Maria as well, that it's really crucial that we get those commitments from every family, and that those of you that are thinking about bringing your student back in the short term and the long term, that we really encourage you to commit to the blended learning model and having students present if that works for your family. Because making those changes in the future may be a little bit more of a challenge. Next, we'll have throughout the week next week, as Marie shared, we will have the COVID staff and parent student training and the health and safety agreement. And so on the 22nd, that will be held for Turlock Junior High parents. On the 23rd for Turlock High parents, the 24th for Dutcher Middle and Roselawn, and then on the 25th for Pittman. And would that include Academy, Marie? And Academy as well. And then our target date is mid-March for reopening. And if it is our hope that whenever we're able to do so, whenever we get that moved to the red tier or we receive the notification from public health, we will be doing everything we can to move forward in a timely manner. Question was asked at the board meeting as far as what does that look like if you receive notification on Tuesday that you are able to reopen. Our plan would be to have students in-person learning in that blended learning model on that following Monday. And so we are doing everything possible to make that happen. Again, we want to encourage you to bring your students back to school if it works for your family, but do be aware that the distance learning model will continue for families, and for those who are working on the hybrid model and prefer to maintain that, that will be available as well. So now I think we can, unless Marie has anything else, I think we're ready to turn it over for questions.
I just want to add, I forgot, Tim, if you can just let me know what day and time is yours. I forgot to add you. Sorry.
We are on the 24th at 3 o'clock for staff and 6 o'clock for parents.
Ah, okay, very good. I just forgot to include Academy.
No problem.
So if we're to some question part, there's a lot of questions about athletics and whether your choice in the commitment survey of in-person or distance learning, whatever schedule you're choosing, will that affect your participation in athletics?
No, that will not. Students who are currently distance learning and want to maintain that and are participating in athletics may continue to do so. And again, those who are in person will have that opportunity as well.
And maybe if you could just reiterate that again, distance learning is the exact same schedule as the in-person learning?
Yes, students will be learning. They will be scheduled for their classes at the same time as those who are doing in-person learning. And so if you are a distance learning student, you will just follow that schedule throughout the week for the mornings and the afternoons.
Thank you. Can you maybe describe what PE might look like during the schedule, and are locker rooms and such still going to be available?
At this point, I would anticipate that the PE will look very different. And actually we do have high school principals here who could speak to some of the work that they've done around that specifically. Angela, would you want to address that?
I will. I was waiting for Gabe. Yes, PE will look different. Students will not be dressing out or going into the locker rooms and changing at this time. We will recommend, bringing a pair of tennis shoes so they can still participate in activities. And then their backpacks and any of the belongings that they have will stay with them in the location that they'll be doing PE. All of our PE will be outside currently in this tier.
Absolutely the same. Thank you, Angela.
Perfect, thank you. When are the commitment surveys due? And again, are they just for this school year and there's no extension in days and nothing's continuing into next school year?
Great question. The surveys are due on the 26th. We would like to get them back so we can move forward with adjusting our schedules. And then this is solely for the remainder of the 2021 school year. Our hope is to return in the fall with a more traditional style of learning and scheduling, and we'll continue to monitor the situation and as we move in that direction.
Thank you. Barney, maybe you could step in and maybe elaborate more on some cleaning and disinfecting, and then also maybe elaborate a little bit more on transportation.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So I did see a couple of questions about have we hired additional folks to help with sanitation and such? And the answer is yes, we have, and we continue to do that for secondaries when we prepare to reopen. It's impractical for us to have enough custodians or sanitary helpers to clean every desk between every period, but we are working on buying the equipment to clean the desks for the classrooms. So it's some spray bottles, some pump spray bottles, and paper towels and such, so that between each classroom, it's going to take a team effort, if you will, from the teachers and possibly the students to assist in keeping all the surfaces clean. We do have hand sanitizer pumps inside of each classroom. We have multiple bottles of hand sanitizer available. I saw some questions on PPE. We do have gloves and face masks available to anybody who needs them. So there shouldn't be any reason why somebody doesn't have a face mask that they can't get one or have one provided to them. As far as transportation goes, it's similar to the other questions, right? So we have we have plans to be able to support our home to school transportation for these smaller in-person learning periods. What we can and can't do is largely dependent on how many students choose to return to school and how many students choose to take advantage of the home to school transportation. So depending on that, we will certainly do as much as we can to provide home to school transportation beyond what we normally do. But again, that's dependent on the resources we have and the folks who choose to take advantage of it. I think that answers the question, Marjorie, unless there's others.
Let's kind of shift a little bit and go back to scheduling. How will you know what cohort you are in and how they are dividing it up? There's a lot of questions about how will I know if I'm in blue or gold or green or silver? So maybe we can talk about how those decisions would be determined.
The principals could probably share that, Gabe or Angela.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that question. So as we start to get the survey results, and we're going to have a live feed, I believe. So as they come in, we're just going to start dividing up those classes. And so at Turlock High, we've already got that set up to go. So as we start to see it, because what we want to try to do is create a even split between the two. So let's just say we have 30 kids in a specific class that are requesting to come back to campus. Then we try to split it up to 15 and 15. So that's the way we're planning on doing it.
And I can kind of chime into that too. We are looking at alphabet, so using alpha, and then looking at class size, because we, like Gabe was saying, we have to make sure that our classes are split up pretty evenly. I know some of the questions about siblings. We will definitely work on getting your siblings on the same days in the secondary schedule.
Perfect, thank you. Oops, sorry about that. Do we have any policies on how we are going to enforce mask wearing?
Yes, we do. Our expectation is that all students will wear masks, and that for those students who refuse to wear masks and will not agree to that, then they'll need to remain on distance learning. That will be the plan. For those students who maybe have a problem and they fail to wear their mask or they don't wear it correctly, after 3 times, then we will work with parents, and the administration will have a conference, and then there will be a contract agreeing that yes, my student will wear their mask. And on the 4th occurrence, then that student would be moved to distance learning. We need to maintain mask wearing. It's one of the most important features and crucial factors in mitigating the spread of the virus. And so it's important for both our students at our schools who are in person as well as our staff.
The only thing I'll add, Heidi, is as you can see on this slide, there are there are some conditions that for someone that may make having a mask on very challenging, especially with maybe a special needs student. So in that case, with a doctor's note, and we have a form that gets filled out that our nurse has, students would wear a face shield with a drape. So if they cannot wear a mask, then they would need to wear a face shield with a drape.
Thank you. Is the grab and go lunch available for all students?
The answer will be yes. The students who remain on distance learning, we will still have the pickups, but the students who are at school, that come to school, all the students will be able to receive a grab and go lunch.
Margie, I just want to also just chime in about masks. I've been in questions about that. I don't think we talked about it, but I know some of the students on here attended our sports training that we did. And yeah, I need you guys to come to the next week's too. The new sports guidance for the state of California requires masks to be worn for athletics. So same situation would apply for PE. Masks will have to be worn during physical activities such as that.
Thanks. I know we're trying to wrap up the time as we continue on here. When people take their commitment surveys, what happens if they want to change their mind afterwards? Is that allowable? Of what model?
So we are going to encourage everybody to get those commitment surveys completed, whether your interest is to continue with distance learning or you're interested in in-person learning. We need all families to complete that. For those few students, and there are very few who are on the hybrid independent learning, you'll receive separate notification to continue on in that model. But if you're interested in moving to in-person from hybrid, then you would want to complete that. You want to complete the survey. And so it's crucial that those are completed. And then Margie, can you reread the rest of that question? There was another piece there.
The question that I just asked was whether they would be able to change their mind after the survey.
Thank you.
Change models.
And so as far as families changing their mind, that's something it's going to be a challenge for us. What we've said in the elementaries is that we sometimes have made changes on a case-by-case basis, but at the secondary sites, we're dealing with such a large volume of students and such complex schedules. It's going to be more of a challenge. And so we will continue, I would say, to look at things on a case-by-case basis. However, in general, we're asking parents to make that commitment now for the remainder of the school year.
I would just like to piggyback on Heidi's information. Just so you know, the commitment is just that. We are asking for a commitment, but I'm reading several of the questions in the chat room. So I'm sure you figured it out. If our concern for the commitment is making sure that we have the capacity inside classrooms to do more in terms of more time on campus and more days as we look to the county and less positive cases. If distance learning has been working for you and you just would like to give your student the opportunity to get back on campus and see how they do and engage with students, and it just doesn't work, a not so serious concern would be, this isn't working for my child, we'd like to return to DL. The significant problem is that if you do not sign up for distance learning now and then want to move to it later, we cannot guarantee that there will be room in those classrooms that will allow us to maintain those social distancing protocols. So if you're straddling between allowing them to return and wanting to give them that experience, I would absolutely encourage you to allow them that experience, because having them return to DL is significantly easier than what Heidi is talking about. Allowing students to remain on distance learning until we increase the days or the time may not be doable. And so you need to know that up front.
Thank you. Also, just to clarify, maybe you could clarify again what synchronous instruction means and whether they would have to change their teachers if they were doing distance learning.
Synchronous instruction is where the teacher is in the classroom. They have technology of a special camera system that works with their computer monitor and helps them to still be able to not stand in front of the computer all day long, but able to move about the classroom, providing instruction to the students who are there present, but then also being visible from students who are at home distance learning. And so those students who are in that class will all be in the same class. They'll just be in different locations. And so the students who are continuing with distance learning, their schedules will look like their peers who are in the in-person learning or the blended model. Their schedules will follow the same pattern during the course of the week, the same time schedule, and then they will also, we will do everything we can to maintain the same teachers that they've had during the course of the year. That's one of our goals in this process. We may see a limited number of schedule changes, but our goal is to maintain the same schedules.
Marjorie, can I answer one more question about the schedules? So I'm getting some questions. I get these from kids a lot, and I hope maybe it's from a student about hanging out with their friends. So right now, where we are with returning students, unfortunately, what high school used to look like, or for some of you who haven't even been here yet, maybe what 8th grade looked like with being able to hang out with your friends at lunch. When you get your lunch, you're going to have to leave campus and go home to distance learning. Our goal, like we shared, is eventually get to a place where we can have students remain on campus, including during lunch, and have a little bit more flexibility for as long as you're social distancing and you're eating and you don't have your mask on, but when you're done eating, you put your mask back on, that we would be able, especially outdoor spaces, to facilitate that. Right now, we don't. And honestly, we need to, like with elementary, we did a staggered reopening. It's almost the same idea with this phased reopening. We need to make sure that what we're doing works and where can we expand it. So can we have students stay on campus during lunch and have the opportunity to see other students besides just the ones in their classes? And a lot of it's going to depend on how things go and how it works with our students. Are they keeping their masks on? Are they following rules? Are they social distancing? Is the community case rate going down? Are we in the orange tier? Are we in the yellow tier? And we know that when the cases go down, there's less risk for campus exposures. So we're keeping in close eye. And the thing I regret the most is I feel like people were thinking this was like the definitive schedule for, and I got a lot of questions about this. This is the schedule for next school year too? No, this is for right now at this moment in time to start the process of reopening our schools. We want nothing more. I'm a mom too. I have 2 students. I have an 8th grader and a junior, to have our students have the ability to be on campus longer. But a lot of that's going to depend on how things continue to go in our community as far as COVID spread and how things go on campus. If students are following rules, wearing their masks, social distancing, then we're going to be having a lot more flexibility on making changes to this schedule, which we know is not perfect.
Okay, so how much time would people be notified of when they are to return to in-person learning? And along those lines, would there be any kind of orientation since some students have never been on campus yet?
Dana, do you want to answer that? Because I think you alluded to it already, or Heidi, one of you.
Heidi did, but I can reiterate that. So we commonly hear, updates like the rest of the community on Tuesdays from public health in terms of our case rate. So when we hear that, or we get that green light that we've moved to the red tier on a Tuesday, we will welcome students onto campus that following Monday. So we'll use that weekend to roll over students in our Aries database system. We already have plans for working through that weekend so that we are prepared to welcome students on that Monday morning.
And then Gabe or Angela, do you have plans for any type of orientation for students who have never been on campus?
We actually do have a video that we were putting together for our 8th graders coming in too that can be viewed. But I just made a note. It might be good to mail home a map for students as well for that first day. So, but we can definitely share out that video that we've created for a campus tour for new students.
Yeah, we're also creating a video, but we do have some conversations happening regarding being able to have someone to help, like a campus supervisor, somebody that's already out there to help guide them to classrooms since they've never been on campus.
Same for 7th graders?
Yeah, we would definitely send a map. Dutchess is a much smaller campus than Turlock Junior, but we would definitely have a map with clearly identified room numbers and teacher names.
Likewise for Turlock Junior High, create a video for our incoming 7th graders and provide them with the map and information.
Can I clarify one thing on this schedule? Because I'm seeing this in the question in the chat, and I got this a question on social media. For the schedule here, if you notice, it says 0 period. So if a child doesn't have 0 period, then that is not when they restart, right? So it's they would leave at 11:10, and then their next class would be at 12:45. So only the 0 period on this day at least has a little bit shorter passage time. I don't know if Scott or Robert Scott, you want to explain that?
Yeah, that's true. Basically, Dutcher and Turlock Junior have the exact same schedules. So there is, unfortunately, because we try to have a similar start time in terms of transportation, we did have to move 0 period. So I also saw that question come up a few times. And, it's just one of those things that we try to balance multiple layers, including getting students transportation to and from. And unfortunately, that was one of the results, was having to move 0 period a little bit later. So that is true. Those students that did have a 0 period, their time from finishing class to get back to their home would be shorter than those that do not have 0 period.
Okay, maybe just a couple more as we try to finish up here. What happens if we open and then there is a surge and we go back into the purple tier? Would we have to close?
I don't mind answering that, and unfortunately, I'm sorry. I think we skipped over that. So one thing I'll say is if we don't reopen while we're in red and we go back to the purple tier, then we would have to wait till we're in red again. So that's why Dana says if we get the green light on Tuesday, we'll be there with bells on Monday. We're ready. But if we go back into the purple tier, the guidance states that if you've reopened and the state goes into the purple tier, you don't have to close. Why is that? It's kind of like what we talked about. We would have our own criteria for closures at the classroom, the school, and the district level. So we would kind of be outside the state guidance, and we'd have our own school closure guidance to follow.
Will there be an after-school program at Turlock Junior High, and will kids be allowed to do after-school activities and clubs and such?
So I can speak to the after-school program, and then we'll look to Robert for the club information. At this time during this school year, we've opted with the city of Turlock to not offer the ACES program after school. And that's for a number of different reasons, including the ability for us to cohort, as well as the schedule that they'd put together for their distance learning camp at the fairgrounds and their ability to bring employees on board. They currently do not have a full staff of ACES employees. And so to start something up at this time of the year, I think would be a bit of a challenge for them, but also Turlock Unified in doing everything possible to reduce the number of cases of COVID. We have reduced the number of non-employees who are on our campuses so that we have fewer adults who we would need to be concerned about regarding infection and contact tracing and so forth. And so while we value very much the after-school program and know it's an important resource for families, we look forward to opening that for the fall 2021, but we'll not have that during the spring, unfortunately.
Marjorie, can I interject one thing? Because I've seen a few questions about band and choir, and we actually reached out to public health for some guidance on that today. Angela had a band teacher, I believe, inquire about that. So unfortunately, there is some very specific guidance on what, especially with choir and wind instruments, can be done indoors. However, when our case rate in our county gets below 25, which will be required for us to reopen anyway, that we have some flexibility to be doing outdoors with masks, socially distanced activities for those for band and for choir. So I know that our band has some, Heidi knows better than me what they're called. I'm not a music person, but some caps and things like that to kind of capture, saliva and things like that. But it'll be outdoors at this time.
Yes, we have ordered and or received already for both band instruments and our choral singers in the at the secondary level, those specific masks, so that they are able, when we get the green light on that, to participate more fully in those activities. In the meantime, I know their teachers are very much looking forward to having them in person for instruction that, again, will look different than in a normal school year, but being able to bring them into class and work with them is something that our music educators are very much looking forward to. And then I think, Robert, if you could share anything regarding clubs at Turlock Junior High.
Yeah, we currently have clubs that are meeting virtually, and we're going to continue to do that. And we'll certainly work towards clubs and activities at our site, but we want to make sure that we're going to do that safely and keep the students and staff safe.
Did any other principals want to weigh in on clubs or after school activities? I apologize. The after school program was specific to Turlock Junior High, but the after school activities was for a variety of sites.
Yeah, we at Pittman, we are the same. We're doing virtual clubs, so nothing's in person, and that will continue just like the junior high was stating.
Same at Turlock High School.
Yeah, same with Dutcher. If we did have an opportunity to bring back, it would obviously have to be small groups, and then the social distancing would have to be in place. But again, it's about student safety as well. So that's something we would definitely want to consider with much precaution.
Thank you. And then Heidi, if we just kind of want to wrap up, again, reminding them, the parents, how will they be receiving their surveys? Will it be online in the mail? And when can they be expecting those?
All right, I'll let our Chief Communication Coordinator field that question. You're still muted, Murray.
So I apologize for taking so long and for being muted. I see a lot of questions I'm actually going to be answering and going into more depth on next week, especially around illness. So please save these dates. Your principals will be sending you the links for the COVID-19 safety trainings. But tomorrow, was tomorrow Friday? It was a quick week. Tomorrow we will be mailing home the commitment surveys, and your principals will also be communicating with you through Blackboard with a digital link. We prefer you to complete those surveys online. It's just a lot easier for us to process, but some people prefer a hard copy, so those will be mailed home as well. Principals, did you want to share anything about that? I know you guys were emailing a little bit about that today.
Yeah, we'll be mailing home the survey, the actual hard copy survey tomorrow, along with some other information. And then the links will be sent to you guys tomorrow through BB Comms. So you're going to get lots of different ways. And then Marie, are you posting those are those posted on the district website at all?
They're not posted yet, but all the schools are going to be putting their information on their home pages. And then I will be gathering all the links from them in an email. And then I will also put it on our reopening plan page as well. And I want to assure you, Marshall, if you're still here, I think there you are, you're going to capture all these questions for us, and that we will be putting together an FAQ that I will share on social media, and I hopefully will have ready by next week when we do our trainings for safety, and then I can just direct you to where those are placed so you can get more information on the things I'm not going to cover in the next training. So if there's something we missed in this training as far as a question, we'll definitely attempt to address that in the FAQs or in the future training. And I want to encourage you, if you're not following us on social media, especially Instagram, we do almost a daily question and answer interaction, and I respond to those. So you're always welcome to reach out on social media to have, if you have questions.
If I could just add, for Turlock High School, and some of the information you'll get is very specific to our site. For example, gates that will have opened and closed at specific times to get in. Of course, you'll get the bell schedule, and just different things that we were, considering on how to keep students safe. And so that information will all come out tomorrow as well.
At this time,
sorry, I was just going to say one more thing, Heidi, is that last night's board meeting, a lot of people are asking, where can we get this presentation? So we did a similar presentation last night, but this presentation we're going to be putting on YouTube probably tomorrow. So you'll be able to watch it later. And I will also include a link to this presentation.
Right. Thank you, Marie. And on my end, I'll close out for us and want to thank you for participating and sharing your questions with us. Those are very helpful, and it helps us to continue to work toward planning to meet the needs for you and your student. We are, as I think most of us have said, very, very much looking forward to having students on campus again, and believe that the time that we will have them on campus during this blended learning model will be beneficial to them for their social emotional well-being and for their academic achievement as they complete this school year. And I don't know if Dana wants to say anything here at the end. But if not, I'll go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Heidi, I've got 2 mute buttons and I can't figure out right now. I'm kind of dizzy. No, I think that's it. The questions have been very helpful in allowing us to see where concerns and information is still needed. I will tell you that I did see something. So yes, we are notified every Tuesday. We monitor state data regularly, but the county updates our positive case rate and where we are every Tuesday. And like I said, we'll be ready to roll so that we can open that following Monday. But thank you for that question.
So thank you, everybody, and good night.